Okay, so today's video is all about discerning the will of God. And I'm just going to kind of share with you how I've discerned different ways in my life. So if you've seen my videos, then you know my vocation story and my discernment with that. It was a very long, hard, I shouldn't say long, but very intense moment of discerning for me of marrying my husband. I had great fear that I was going to marry the wrong person, and I didn't want to marry the person that God did not intend for me to marry. And so it's very interesting because I struggled with a lot of anxiety and fear during that discernment process. So I would love to say that, oh, discernment is easy. You just have this, this gut feeling of this is what I should do, and you go and do it, when that is not the case for everything. I feel like these big decisions in our life need to be discerned really very carefully, like marriage or, becoming a nun or, whatever. We want to do God's will first and foremost, and I think so prayer is the biggest part of that. And it wasn't until I did a novena that God revealed to me that Eric was my husband. But until that point, I think it was like 3 months to that point, that I struggled with severe anxiety the entire dating process. And I think part of my fear was God was going to take him away, because he had taken away every other person that I loved, in that way before. And Eric was kind of like the pinnacle of what I wanted in a man, he was everything I'd prayed for and was beyond anything I could ever. To this day, he's the most amazing man I've ever met. So I think there was a fear of truly letting go and letting God tell me that he was, because when you let go, he could take it away, right? And he has in the past. But so there's that type of discernment. I have several videos on those, your discerning process of marriage and all of that. But there's also the discernment of homeschooling. I did a couple of videos recently about that. So I think one of the nice things about being married is, if you're like me and you're a woman, I love that the Bible says to be submissive to your husband. I love that. I know a lot of women don't like that, but for me, it makes my discernment a lot easier because it's not all on my shoulders. And I get to be that quiet strength of praying for my husband about big things that we have to go through and figure out together. I get to be that silent prayer warrior. I shouldn't say silent, because I definitely share my thoughts and, but I know at the end of the day, he gets to fully decide what we're going to do. So I talk a little bit about that in my homeschooling video, that I don't homeschool, and I'm okay with that. Actually, I've offered to my husband, we've had conversations, and he is not okay with that. And that's okay. And that is so refreshing when you can get to that place of being that submissive wife and not nagging your husband and telling him what he's doing is wrong or whatever. Have a conversation. Let it be he hears you, you listen to him, back and forth, you chat, you talk. It doesn't have to be a yelling thing. But at the end of the day, say, okay, God's will be done, and if I'm not called to homeschool, or if I am called to homeschool, God will change his heart, and being obedient to our spouse is huge. I mean, it is in the Bible. This is a huge thing in the Bible, is being submissive to your husband. And if you keep reading, it's even more important for the men, because they have to love their spouse the way that God loves the church, which is sacrificial. It's very much dying to yourself. The other ways that I discern is I just ask God, because there are some things with YouTube or things like that where I say, You know, I pray about things. God, what do you want me to talk about? And I try to listen that way. So that's a way that, I mean, prayer should always be a part of your discernment process. Always. Even if you already think you know the answer, you should always give God the final say, is pretty much what the way that I look at it. So so for YouTube, like for example, I want to be as open to God in YouTube that I possibly can. You know, there are limits that I have that I don't feel comfortable doing, but I need to be open to God's will. So for example, I have at this point not wanted to be a speaker. Like, I don't want to go and give talks, even though I've done it in the past. I did a ministry called Net Ministries, and I gave talks, like, and I was all right. Like, I don't think I was a phenomenal speaker or whatever, but it's been one of those things for me where I have just said, no, God, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. You know, and it just recently was where I said, okay, God, if you want me to be a speaker, then number one, my husband has to be okay with it. Number two, let people call me or contact me to speak. Those are the two things that I need to know if you want me to be a speaker, you know, and so sometimes I'll do things like that where I'm like, I'm close to something and I just, you know, God just wants me to be open to his will. You know, if he wants me to go somewhere and evangelize, I need to be open to that. I need to not be closed-minded in that. I need to say, okay, God, your will be done. Even if I fail at it, even if I'm not good, if, you know, like, how will I ever know? Like, how could God possibly use me if I'm not open to that? You know, so that's another way I discern. And the reason that I discern it that way is St. Clare. So St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare, I love her story because let me tell you her story. She did not have a desire to be a nun, but she felt like that is what she was supposed to do. Her family did not want her to be a nun. They were very wealthy and they wanted her to get married and, you know, all of that. And she met St. Francis and she just like felt like she was supposed to go, but she wasn't sure. Like, she was on the fence. She's like, I think I'm supposed to do this. I'm not sure. And the day was getting closer for her to take her vows. And she was constantly on the fence. She was constantly on the fence up to the day, up to the moment. And she said, and this changed my life forever. When I read this, it took so much pressure off of me because she truly wanted to know God's will. She was not hearing his voice, but she wanted to. In her heart, she wanted to do God's will. And she said, as she was like, right before she went to take her final vows, like minutes before, she said, God, I do not know if this is your will for me. I don't know. Please know that I just want to do your will. And if this is not your will, please forgive me and please carry through me anyway, because my desire is truly to do your will. And so she went and she said, this is so amazing, you guys. She said that she took her final vows and that from that moment on, she had complete and total peace and loved her vocation. It was beautiful. It was amazing. And she did awesome. Like, it was like a total switch. And it was almost a leap of faith of her taking her vows, which is interesting because Mother Teresa is the complete opposite, where she, you know, felt called to be a nun, a sister, and she, you know, worked, you know, with this, as a sister, and she felt God called her to start up is it the Missionaries of Charity, her order, and so she's like, okay, and she like had all this fire to do it. She does it, and instantly it was the opposite of St. Clare's, and she said it was the dark night of the soul ever since, which is where your soul is just, it's almost numb to everything. You know, it's very hard. A lot of saints go through it. Actually, I would probably say most saints go through it. So if you're going through that numbness, that's okay. That does not mean you're any less holy or in line with God. Sometimes God does that to make sure like you're in it for him, not for that fuzzy feeling that we get, you know, when we're on that spiritual high. I could do a whole video on that, but pretty much that, she said from that day on that she took her vows, that she started her ministry, she felt nothing. And that the rest of her life, like she didn't have that spark or desire to do it, but she, out of obedience, she obviously still did it and followed through, and she did amazing work. God still used her. But those are two stories of complete opposite. If you think about it, their stories are so opposite, and they're both saints. So the moral of the story is you have to discern. You have to figure out, God, what are you asking? And sometimes it's, you have to take that leap of faith and you have to just trust, you know. And I've heard a lot of holy saints say that if you don't know, if you're on the fence about something, you don't know which one is holier, which one's better, like it's kind of like even playing field, then choose the harder one out of love for God. And just say that to him. Say, God, I don't know which one you want, but out of love for you, I'm going to choose the harder one. It's more sacrificial, and that is what I'm going to do. So I want you to know there's nothing selfish within this. It is all fully and completely for you. And so discernment is hard. Discernment, the reason discernment is so hard is because it's so different for everybody. We all have totally different discernment processes. Like I said, with my husband, full anxiety, up until he proposed to me, and I still like was afraid I was gonna go back and, you know, think that I married the wrong person or something. Thankfully that never happened. Whereas other people, they meet, they know instantly, and they live happily ever after, you know. And it's so different for everybody. God knows you to the core of who you are. He knows you, he knows your intentions, and I think that's very, very key. You know, he knew St. Clare's intention. He knew that that would be a leap of faith for her, but yet he did it. He said, okay, like, thank you for that sacrifice. Thank you for being so honest and real. I will bless you the rest of your life. Like, you are going to have so much joy in this vocation. And she did, you know. And so that's just something to think about. There's no black or white with discernment. And I think that's can be very hard, the discernment process, whether it's your vocation, whether it's homeschooling, whether it is, you know, getting a job, you know, anything, whatever it is, discernment can be very hard. But if you pray and you give God your all, you pray and you just do the best you can, God will bless you abundantly. And so hopefully that brought you some light and you feel refreshed after that, like, okay, like, put your trust in God and he will guide you. So anyway, that's what I have about discernment. I hope that this helped you, and until next time, I will see you all later. God bless.